Hi, my name is Katy Groves, and I'm a survivor of ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control programming. In this video, I'm going to share my story of how I was born into a highly destructive satanic cult and was programmed for the better part of 17 years before I broke free and found my healing. This is a very, very hard video to make. As anyone knows who has spoken out about this stuff, it can be extremely frightening to put yourself out there, especially on the internet, where anyone can see, including the very people who harmed you. But I think it is necessary, for me personally, to share my story so that others may be helped and so that I may free myself from the burden of isolation of living with all of this terrible, terrible pain. This is going to be triggering for anyone who watches this, and I'm going to have to probably do this in multiple parts, no pun intended, because my phone only allows me to record about 9 minutes of video at a time. I don't know how long this will be, but I'm going to speak my heart, and hopefully people will hear this and will benefit from what I have to say. Like I said, I was born into a highly destructive satanic cult. I need not mention it by name, although I'm sure plenty of people can figure it out, as I am a survivor, and I will tag this as such, of modern mind control programming, offshoot of Project MKUltra, the government mind control project that was so infamous when it became known, I think around the 1970s. That was long before I was born. I was born in 1996. I'm 21 years old. Until I was 17, as I said, I was a fully enslaved member of the cult, and I was used in various different ways, including in child sex trafficking, in other horrendous forms of child trafficking. I was forced into snuff films. It's probably the worst thing, in addition to being sexually abused by both of my parents and used as a sex slave by them from birth. I was tortured. I was forced to kill. I was brainwashed through monarch programming. I don't need to go into more details than that about the tortures, but anyone who wishes to look up information on that online, you can find plenty of information about all the horrible things that people have gone through in the Monarch Project and in MKUltra. And on the surface, I won't say everything looked fine, but perhaps it did to an untrained eye. I was a highly intelligent child with academic parents. Both my parents have doctorate degrees. My father is an academic and a professional. My mother is a musician and a teacher. And I grew up in an extremely fancy, ostentatious, beautiful home in a secluded area in the southern United States, where no one could see or hear what was going on outside of that house. And while atrocities, terrible things were committed in my home, in my parents' home, the worst horrors were committed in the trafficking ring that I was taken to on a near nightly basis, and sometimes for actual long periods of time. So difficult to speak about this. I've seen thousands of people die, namely children. I've been raped probably hundreds of thousands of times, tortured continuously for years on end. And during this time, I had little to no awareness of what was going on. I would go to school, I would come home, I would be ritually abused, I would be trafficked, I would be raped. I would wake up the next day and I would not know what had happened to me. I did not know why I was so exhausted all the time as if I never slept. Why, or even that, my eyes were dull. My pupils were pinned out from opiates I did not know I was being given, or they were greatly dilated from amphetamines I did not know that I was being given, or psychedelic drugs that I had no awareness that I had been given or that I had even experienced. I did not know what was happening to me, but I did have glimpses and bits and pieces throughout all of this that now that I'm aware of what happened, I can see that I always retained some awareness, some knowledge of what was going on. There was a moment when I was a small child when, for whatever reason, the post-hypnotic suggestion I was perhaps given did not sink in to keep my memory from integrating. And I saw an image on a TV screen in our home of some of the most violent, frightening, horrifying images of violence being done to women. The images were on a grid. There were dozens of different women being harmed in the same way. And I remember my father looking very embarrassed, very scared. And then my memory went blank. He turned off the TV. He did not intend for me to have seen that. He knew that I was not in a properly unconscious state in that moment. I had not been properly programmed to block out what I had just seen. So I always retained that memory with me. There were also memories of sexual abuse that I retained. And I knew the whole time that my father was a rageaholic and that he was severely abusive and deranged. But most of it I was unaware of consciously until I had my final awakening at 17. And between 17 and 18, around the time I was 18, I became aware that I had dissociative identity disorder. I became aware that I had been programmed, and then I became aware that I had been programmed in Project Monarch and MK Ultra. The level of pain that is endured by people who go through this is unimaginable. And it pains me to speak about these things now. But like I said, I feel it important to get the message out there. These things do happen to people. People do endure these horrors. And people do perpetrate them. Now, there's a lot of disbelief in this culture. There's a lot of disbelief all over the world, I'm sure, but American culture is definitely a denial culture, and it can be very, very hard for ritual abuse survivors to speak out and be received by the general public. Harassment from cult members, as well as from ignorant people in the general public, can be devastating to survivors who have already been through so much. And upon finally breaking free and entering the outside world, to find that this quote-unquote outside world, that this duality of the terrible, terrible inside and this mysterious or even magical outside world is actually false, that people are people, and people perpetrated this, and people exist on the outside. Having that duality dissolve can be extremely traumatizing. And so sharing this stuff to the general public, knowing the ways in which I will likely be received, is difficult. My video is about to time out, so please join me for part 2. I will link it below. Thank you. Hello, my name is Katy Groves, and this is a continuation of my story, part 1, which you can find linked below. I left off talking about the ways in which ritual abuse survivors, mind control survivors, are received by the general public and by people who are still in the cults after they break free. I actually don't remember how that flowed or the continuity of it all went because of my DID. I don't even remember what I was talking about. But I believe that the next thing that I was going to talk about was about how I personally know that what I went through really happened to me. I spoke about having some pieces of memory that never split off, that remained integrated, that were proof that I was trafficked, sexually abused, and programmed, that terrible atrocities were going on. My abusers did not intend for me to remember. Now, while this to me is by itself proof enough, that was not enough for me in the beginning of my healing. I needed hard, physical, tangible proof that I was not making this all up, that I was not crazy or delusional. Don't like the word crazy, but we'll go with delusional. I was not delusional. That I had not false memory syndrome or any of that stuff. I hate that phrase. And as horrifically traumatizing and painful as it was, I got that proof that I needed to know that I went through this. Not too long after I began to awaken, I was still in contact with perpetrators. And as a result of this, I saw an image of child pornography of myself around the age of 11. And not only did I see child pornography of myself, but I saw child pornography that matched memories that I had. I may not have had the specific memory of that specific scene, but there was another child in the photograph who was dressed up, looked a certain way that matched my memories, was of a certain ethnicity that matched my memories. And I was wearing something that also was in my memories that I had been newly integrating with upon awakening to all of this. And I wasn't able to see it at first that it was myself. I was horrified upon seeing child pornography. I did not wish to, and like I said, it was a result of being in contact with people who were still abusing me at the time. But many months later, I was able to integrate with the awareness that it was me. I have an almost photographic memory, and so that memory image was burned into my mind, and I was able to see that that child in the photograph was me. This was devastating for me. I almost went insane. I was sobbing, inconsolable, I could barely sleep. It was a nightmare. But it did confirm to me that I had been trafficked, and I had been sold, and that my recovered memories were real. That recovered memory is real. Dissociative amnesia is real, and that I had repressed and blocked these things out as a result of my programming and the severity of the trauma. That was not all. Shortly after that, I asked a family member, who I was still regrettably in contact with, due to financial reasons, to send me childhood pictures. It was for my healing. It was a suggestion of someone who was a support person who was helping me, not in a therapeutic role, but helping me as a friend and as a fellow survivor of child abuse to come to terms with some of my experiences. She suggested that I obtain some childhood photographs, and so I did so. And as it turned out, this family member decided to include, or the cult decided they should include, some extremely horrific images of my own programming and child abuse in the album. I was not able to see what was in these pictures, the frightening parts of these pictures, for I think over a year. There were only 2 to my knowledge that contained these images, and I got rid of all of the pictures when I realized what they were, because I did not trust myself to know what was in all of the pictures, to be able to see what was in all of the pictures because of the fragmentation in my mind. I did not want to possess illegal material. I do not possess any illegal material. I'm not interested in that. I am a law-abiding citizen now. And so I discarded those images. But I did have in my hands photographs of programming sessions and of snuff in the programming sessions and child sexual abuse that I endured. It was a horrible, horrible thing to talk about, but it is true. So I know for a fact that I went through these things. I did not just see these pictures. I took them to authorities, knowing full well that I could not fully disclose who had abused me, and knowing full well that nothing would legally be done. I received, definitely considered to be gaslighting and emotional abuse from a law enforcement officer who I took the picture to, who wasn't even willing to acknowledge what he saw in the picture of the snuff. But I was able to turn this stuff over to the cops, and I was able to feel like I had done my part, the best that I could, in taking care of myself and of the people who I know personally who are still enslaved and who are still being harmed by the people who harmed me. When I was 14 years old, I was reprogrammed for dysfunction, for drug addiction. I was given a new name, a new identity internally, and I was taken out of school, or more accurately, I was repeatedly enrolled in school and then programmed to fail so that I would believe that I was inept, I was incapable, and I no longer had a place in this world. Academics was everything in my family. My father was very wrapped up in Ivy League culture, and I was to go to Harvard or I was to be a failure. That is what I was told. I was supposed to be this Ivy League debutante on the surface and this occultic master snuff queen under the surface. That is the reality of what I went through. That is the reality of who I was supposed to be. So, when I was pulled out of school, I lost everything inside. I lost my identity. And more accurately, not just pulled out of school, but like I said, when I was forced to repeatedly fail, I did not know that I was being programmed. I just knew that I couldn't think anymore. I couldn't function anymore. And I was encouraged to use drugs. Not the drugging that was forced upon me, but I was programmed to, quote-unquote, choose them, to be aware that I was using them. And while, of course, this was forced upon me, I did not know that this was forced upon me. I thought this was my choice, and I thought that now that I was no longer able to handle school, drugs were the life for me. I became addicted to crystal meth in my conscious personality at the age of 16, and that was when I really went through the existential crisis and the transformation that has led me to break free now. My video is about to time out again, so please join me for part 3. Thank you.